How do you lose your wedding rings, Beth? That's how it all started. She stood there in the kitchen, her face barely showing a flicker of concern. I don't know, John. They probably slipped off when I was at yoga. She shrugged it off like it was nothing, like the symbol of our marriage wasn't worth a second thought. And I really tried, to believe her. But something about the way she said it felt wrong, too casual. Too easy. But I didn't press her. I let it slide. Maybe I didn't want to believe what my gut was telling me, that something was off. It wasn't until 2 days later, when I found that used rubber in the back seat of her car, that everything came crashing down. That's when I knew. It was still there, shoved into the corner like an afterthought, as if whoever had used it couldn't be bothered to even hide the evidence. My heart dropped. My stomach churned. I stared at it for a full minute, hoping it wasn't real, hoping it was some twisted joke. But no. It was there. And with it, the reality of what I had been denying for weeks. Beth was cheating on me. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay there staring at the ceiling, knowing I had to do something. I wasn't going to let her continue lying to my face. I wasn't going to let her pretend that everything was fine. But I needed proof. Cold, hard proof. And that's when I decided to hire a private investigator. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know that this was just the tip of the iceberg. Stay tuned, because this is where the real story begins. 1 week. That's all it took for Tom, the private investigator, to come back with answers. I hadn't slept much since finding that rubber in Beth's car. Every night, she climbed into bed next to me, pretending like nothing had changed, while my mind was spinning out of control. I replayed every excuse she'd given me over the past few months: late nights at work, yoga classes that suddenly took 2 hours, girls' weekends that seemed a little too frequent. How had I missed it? Or maybe, deep down, I didn't want to see it. When Tom called me in, I wasn't ready. I told myself I was, but my gut was twisted into knots. I could feel the blood pumping in my temples as I pulled into his office parking lot. There was no turning back now. I had asked for the truth, and I was about to get it, whether I liked it or not. I sat down in his office, and without a word, Tom slid a folder across the table toward me. It was thick. Too thick. My hands shook as I reached for it, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. "Take a deep breath," Tom said, his voice calm, almost detached. This was just another day for him, another client, another cheating spouse. For me, though, this was the end of life as I knew it. I opened the folder. The first photo hit me like a punch to the stomach. There she was, Beth, laughing, smiling, her hand on the arm of a man I didn't know. And not just any man. No, this guy looked like something out of a fitness magazine, all muscles and charm. They were outside a restaurant, leaning close, their faces inches apart. But that wasn't the worst part. It got worse. The next few photos told me everything I needed to know. A hotel room. Her car parked outside. Them walking in, hand in hand. The timestamps on the photos showed it wasn't just once, either. This had been going on for months. I felt like I was watching my life shatter in slow motion. The anger surged through me, hot and sharp, but there was also something else: sadness. Deep, overwhelming sadness. This was the woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved. And she had been lying to my face, night after night, all while playing house with some guy named Jared. Tom spoke again, pulling me back into the moment. She's been meeting him at the same hotel every week. It started 6 months ago, right around the time she started telling you about her networking events. 6 months. Half a year of betrayal. Of coming home to me, kissing me, looking me in the eye, and lying. I stared at the photos, numb, trying to process it all. But there was no processing it. There was only one thing left to do now. I wasn't going to sit by and let her get away with this. As I walked out of Tom's office, I knew what my next move had to be. I was going to confront her, but not before I had a plan. I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. I wasn't going to let her make excuses or turn the tables on me. No, I was going to take her down. And I was going to make sure she never saw it coming. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay there, wide awake, while Beth slept next to me, unaware of what was coming. My mind was racing with everything I had seen, every photo burned into my brain. I kept picturing her in that hotel with Jared, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world, like I didn't exist. I knew I couldn't hold it in much longer. The anger was building inside me like a volcano, ready to erupt. I wasn't sure how I'd stay calm once I finally confronted her, but I needed to stay in control. I had to do this right. The next morning, I waited. I watched her go through her usual routine, completely unaware that I knew everything. She smiled at me, kissed me on the cheek, and made herself a cup of coffee like it was just another day. It made me sick. After breakfast, when she was about to head out, probably to meet him, I decided it was time. I leaned against the kitchen counter, blocking her way to the door. "Beth, we need to talk." She stopped, her hand on the doorknob. For a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Fear? I wasn't sure, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. She turned to me with that same fake smile she always used when she was lying. "What's up, babe?" "I'm kind of in a rush." I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at her, feeling the rage simmering just beneath the surface. "Where are you going?" Her smile faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered. "I told you, I'm meeting Sarah for brunch. We've had this planned for weeks." Sarah. Another lie. I knew exactly where she was going. "Don't lie to me, Beth." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw panic flash across her face. But she wasn't going to give up that easily. Beth was a master manipulator, and I knew she'd try to worm her way out of this. "I'm not lying, John. Why would you even?" I cut her off, my voice cold and hard. "I hired a private investigator." Her mouth snapped shut, and all the color drained from her face. There it was, the truth finally hitting her. She knew the game was up. For a moment, we stood there in silence, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I watched her try to piece together a response, try to find a way out, but there wasn't one. Not this time. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaky. "John. I can explain." "Explain?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just bitterness. "Explain what, Beth? That you've been screwing some guy behind my back for months? That you lied to me, over and over again? What exactly is there to explain?" She opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't finished. The anger was spilling out now, and I couldn't stop it. "Do you think I'm stupid? I saw the pictures, Beth. I know about Jared. I know about the hotel. I know everything." Her face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw her start to crack. She looked like a cornered animal, desperate to escape. But instead of guilt or apology, she went straight into defense mode. "John, it's not what you think," she cried, her voice rising with panic. "It was a mistake, just a stupid mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen." "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice thick with disbelief. "A mistake doesn't last 6 months, Beth. A mistake doesn't involve weekly trips to a hotel." She was silent, her eyes wide, tears beginning to form. But I wasn't moved. Not anymore. The sadness I'd felt earlier was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow anger. "I trusted you," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. I loved you. And you threw it all away for, what? Some guy who doesn't give a damn about you? For a fling? Beth's tears finally started to fall, but I wasn't sure if they were real or just another part of her act. She stepped toward me, reaching out to touch my arm, but I stepped back. Please, John, she begged. We can work through this. I love you. It didn't mean anything. I was just. Stop. I cut her off, shaking my head. Don't even say it. Don't insult me with that garbage. She froze, her hand still reaching for me, but I wasn't about to let her manipulate her way out of this. You want to fix this? I said, my voice low. You want me to believe you still care about us? Then why don't you start by telling me the truth for once in your life? Beth was caught. The lies had unraveled, and now it was time for her to face the music. But even I didn't realize how twisted things would get from here. Beth stood frozen in front of me, her eyes filled with crocodile tears, but I could see through it now. The act, the excuses, the fake remorse, it was all part of the same game she'd been playing for months. But this time, the stakes were higher, and she was losing. Big time. I'm telling you the truth now, she whispered, her voice shaky. I swear, John, it was a mistake. I was feeling lost, and Jared, he was just there. It didn't mean anything. I laughed again, that same bitter laugh that seemed to rise out of me without permission. Didn't mean anything? You were with him for 6 months, Beth. 6 months of sneaking around, lying to my face, and you're trying to tell me it was just a meaningless fling? She wiped her tears, but it felt like more of a performance than anything real. You weren't there for me. You were always working late, always busy with something else. I felt invisible. There it was, the classic move. Blame me. Turn the tables. Make me the reason for her betrayal. I should have seen it coming. So, let me get this straight, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You felt invisible, so you decided the best way to solve that problem was to cheat on me. With some random guy who works at a tech firm. That makes sense. Her face twisted, and for a second, I saw the real Beth, the one underneath the lies and manipulations. The one who didn't like being caught, who didn't like losing control. But she quickly covered it up with more tears. I didn't plan for it to happen, John, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought about stopping, I really did, but... But what? I interrupted, feeling my patience wear thin. You didn't because you liked it? Because it was easier than being honest with me? Or because you thought I'd never find out? She winced at that, and I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to find a way to salvage this, to make herself the victim. But I wasn't letting her off the hook. Don't you dare try to put this on me, Beth, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I've been here. I've always been here. I'm the one who worked late to provide for us, to make sure we had a good life. I'm the one who trusted you, who believed in you. And you repay me by crawling into bed with someone else? She didn't have an answer to that, so she did what she always did when she was cornered, she lied. I ended it with Jared, she blurted out suddenly, as if that would make everything better. It's over. I swear, it's over. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Because according to the investigator, you were with him just last week. The color drained from her face again. She knew she was caught, and she didn't have a way out. But instead of coming clean, she doubled down. Okay, fine, she snapped, her tone shifting from pleading to defensive. Yes, I saw him last week. But that was the last time. I told him it was over. I didn't know how to tell you. I stared at her, shaking my head in disbelief. Do you even hear yourself, Beth? You're still lying. You can't stop, can you? Even now, when everything's out in the open, you're still trying to twist the story to make yourself look better." She crossed her arms, her tears gone now, replaced by a cold defiance. "I'm not lying, John. I'm telling you the truth." I stepped closer, my voice deadly calm. "You want me to believe you? Then show me your phone." Her eyes widened in panic. "What? Why?" "Because I know you're still talking to him," I said, holding out my hand. "If you're really done with him, then you won't have a problem showing me." For a long moment, she stood there, staring at me, her body tense. I could see the internal battle playing out in her mind. She knew if she handed me that phone, it was game over. The final nail in the coffin of her lies. But she didn't move. "That's what I thought," I said, my voice cold. "You're not done with him. You're not even close. You never were." Beth's lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time, she didn't try to argue. She didn't try to explain it away. She just stood there, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before, fear. "I trusted you, Beth," I said quietly, feeling the weight of the words as I spoke them. "I gave you everything. And you threw it all away for, what? A thrill? A guy who won't even care about you in a few months? Was it worth it?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. "I'm done," I said, turning away from her. "I'm not going to live like this anymore." I walked out of the house, leaving Beth standing in the kitchen, her lies finally crumbling around her. But I knew this was only the beginning. I wasn't just going to walk away without a fight. I had a lawyer lined up, and I was ready to take her down in court. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to lose everything. As I drove away from the house, my hands gripping the steering wheel tight enough to turn my knuckles white, I felt a storm of emotions swirling inside me. Betrayal, anger, and disgust, mostly at Beth, but also at myself. How had I let this go on for so long? How had I missed the signs? But now wasn't the time to wallow in self-pity. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Beth might have thought she could weasel her way out of it with her tears and her pathetic excuses, but I wasn't going to make it easy for her. No, I was going to make sure she felt every ounce of pain that she had inflicted on me. She'd taken my trust, my loyalty, and crushed them beneath her feet. Now, it was time for her to face the consequences. I had already made the call to a lawyer the day after the private investigator handed me the photos. His name was David Calloway, and his reputation was as ruthless as they came. He was the kind of guy who didn't just win cases, he demolished his opposition, leaving nothing but scorched earth behind. Exactly what I needed. I arrived at David's office later that afternoon. It was a sleek, modern space, with polished floors and walls lined with expensive-looking artwork. The kind of place that made it clear this guy didn't come cheap. But I didn't care about the money. If anyone could help me tear Beth's world apart, it was him. David sat behind his desk when I walked in, a sharp-looking man in his early 40s with a well-tailored suit and a look of quiet confidence. He gestured for me to sit down, and I did, the photos from the PI burning a hole in the folder I held. "John, right?" he said, offering a handshake that felt more like a formality than a welcome. "Let's get straight to it. What's the situation?" I placed the folder on the desk and pushed it toward him. "My wife's been cheating on me for 6 months. I've got evidence, photos, locations, the whole deal. I want a divorce, and I want to make sure she pays for what she's done." David didn't even blink. He opened the folder, glancing at the photos without much of a reaction, then looked back at me. "Okay. We can work with this. First off, I'm sorry you're going through this. It's rough, but we'll make sure you come out on top. From what I can see here, you've got a strong case. Infidelity is always messy in court, but with evidence this solid, she doesn't stand a chance." Hearing those words gave me a strange sense of relief. For the first time in days, I felt like I had some control over the situation. Like I could actually do something about it. David continued, laying out the options. "We're going to hit her hard," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You'll want to file for divorce immediately, and with the evidence of her affair, we can push for a favorable settlement. Depending on the assets, we can make sure you walk away with more than your fair share. And if she tries to fight it? Well, we'll be ready for that too." I nodded, taking it all in. "I don't want her to get anything," I said, the anger bubbling back up. "Not after what she's done." David leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "We'll do our best to make that happen. But remember, divorce courts can be unpredictable, especially when emotions are involved. If she's as manipulative as you say, she might try to play the victim card, claim she was neglected, or that the marriage was falling apart long before the affair. We'll need to stay one step ahead of her." The thought of Beth standing in court, playing the innocent wife, trying to twist everything to make herself look like the victim, made my blood boil. But I trusted David. He was sharp, calculating, and he wasn't going to let her get away with it. "I'll take care of everything," he said, his tone reassuring. "All you need to do is make sure you're ready for a fight. This could get ugly." "I'm ready," I replied, my voice steady. I didn't care how ugly it got. I was ready to drag Beth through the mud if that's what it took. David nodded. "Good. We'll start by filing for divorce and serving her the papers. After that, we'll see how she reacts. If she's smart, she'll try to settle. If not, well, we'll be prepared." I left David's office feeling a strange sense of empowerment. This wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, about making sure Beth paid for every lie she told, every night she spent with Jared while I sat at home like a fool. I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. When I got home, Beth was already there, sitting on the couch, her face tear-streaked and desperate. She must have realized something was wrong when I hadn't come back right away. She jumped up as soon as she saw me. "John, please, we need to talk," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I made a mistake, but I love you. We can fix this, we can go to counseling, we can." "No, Beth," I cut her off, my voice cold and firm. "We can't fix this." Her face fell, and I could see the fear creeping back in. She knew what was coming. She knew this wasn't just a fight she could talk her way out of. I pulled the divorce papers out of my jacket pocket and dropped them on the table in front of her. "It's over," I said, turning and walking away without another word. But I wasn't done yet. The real fight was just beginning, and Beth was about to realize that she wasn't the only one who could play dirty. Keep watching, there's more to come. The next morning, Beth was gone when I woke up. The house felt eerily quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your chest, heavy and suffocating. Part of me wondered if she had left for good, maybe gone to Jared, or simply to escape the situation. But I knew better than to assume anything with Beth. She wasn't the type to go down without a fight. And sure enough, by midday, my phone buzzed with a text from her. "We need to talk. Please, John. Let's meet at the coffee shop this afternoon." I stared at the message, my stomach twisting. What was the point? We'd already said everything there was to say, or at least, I had. But knowing Beth, she had more lies, more manipulations up her sleeve, and she wasn't done trying to claw her way out of this mess. I debated ignoring her, but something inside me wanted to face her one last time. I wanted to see what excuse she would come up with next, what sob story she'd spin this time. So, I agreed. I figured if nothing else, it would give me some satisfaction to watch her squirm, knowing the end was inevitable. When I arrived at the coffee shop, she was already there, sitting at a small table in the corner, nervously stirring a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. She looked different, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. But I wasn't buying it. Not after everything. I sat down across from her without saying a word, just watching her fidget, waiting for her to speak first. "John," she started, her voice soft, almost trembling. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this, but I need you to understand that I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I was lost. I didn't know how to handle things, and Jared, it just happened. I swear, I never meant to hurt you." Her eyes were wide, pleading, but I could see the cracks in her facade. This was Beth's last attempt at control, at twisting the narrative to make herself look like the victim. But it wasn't going to work. Not this time. "You didn't mean to hurt me?" I repeated, my voice low and controlled. "Beth, you knew exactly what you were doing. Every single time you snuck out to meet him, you made a choice. And now you're trying to make it seem like you were just lost? Don't insult me." She flinched at my words, but the tears didn't stop. They never did. "I know I messed up," she whispered. "But John, we can get through this. We've been through so much together. Don't throw it all away because of one mistake." "One mistake?" I said, laughing bitterly. "It wasn't one mistake, Beth. It was 6 months of lies, of betrayal. And you didn't stop. You kept going, knowing exactly what you were doing. So don't stand there and pretend it's something we can just sweep under the rug." I could see the panic rising in her eyes. She wasn't used to me being this direct, this unyielding. In the past, I'd always been the one to bend, to forgive, to smooth things over. But I wasn't that guy anymore. Not after what she'd done. "John, please," she begged, reaching across the table to grab my hand. I pulled away, not even wanting her touch anymore. It felt like poison. "I've already filed the divorce papers," I said bluntly, watching her reaction. "There's nothing left to talk about." Her face went pale, and for a moment, she looked genuinely scared. "Divorce?" she whispered, as if she hadn't expected it to go that far. "John, you don't mean that. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, we can." "I don't want to fix it, Beth," I interrupted, my voice ice cold. "I don't want counseling, and I don't want to work through anything. I want out. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Her hand started to shake, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not just fear of losing me, but fear of losing everything, our life, the house, the money, her reputation. She had never thought it would come to this. She'd always had control, always been able to manipulate her way out of situations. But not this time. "Please, John," she said, her voice breaking. "I'll do anything. Just, please don't leave me. I'll stop seeing Jared, I'll prove it to you. We can start over." It was pathetic, really. Watching her scramble for some kind of lifeline, trying to salvage what she'd destroyed. But there was no going back. Not now, not ever. "You should have thought about that 6 months ago," I said, standing up from the table. "It's too late, Beth." She reached out again, but I was already walking away, leaving her sitting there in her own mess of lies and desperation. As I stepped outside into the cool afternoon air, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt free. I had made my decision, and I wasn't looking back. Later that evening, I sat with David Calloway, the lawyer, finalizing the divorce papers. Beth was going to fight, of course. She wasn't going to let me walk away without a battle. But I was ready for it. I had the evidence, the lawyer, and most importantly, the resolve to see this through. She wasn't going to take anything more from me. "Are you sure you're prepared for this?" David asked, eyeing me carefully. "Because once this goes to court, it's going to get ugly. She's going to pull every trick in the book." I nodded, meeting his gaze with determination. "I'm ready." She's not going to win this. But Beth wasn't done yet. Little did I know, her next move would be more desperate, and more dangerous, than I ever could have imagined. I thought Beth was done. I thought after that scene in the coffee shop, she'd finally accept it. That she'd realize she couldn't claw her way out of this one. But that's the thing about Beth, she never knew when to quit. And what came next? Well, it was something I never saw coming. A few days after I filed the divorce papers, things were strangely quiet. Too quiet. Beth hadn't called, texted, or shown up at the house since I handed her the papers. Part of me thought maybe she was finally giving up, maybe she was retreating into whatever twisted version of herself she could live with. But I should have known better. One night, I got home late from work, still trying to throw myself into anything that didn't remind me of the mess my life had become. The house was dark, and for a moment, the silence felt comforting. But as soon as I walked into the living room, I noticed something was off. The scent of her perfume hung faintly in the air. Beth had been there. My heart raced as I flicked on the lights, scanning the room. Nothing seemed out of place at first, no broken windows, no obvious sign of a break-in, but there was an unsettling feeling crawling up my spine. I checked the kitchen, the bedroom, and finally, the study. That's when I saw it. Everything on my desk had been rifled through, papers scattered, files opened, drawers left ajar. And in the middle of the chaos, the divorce documents were lying out in the open, ripped apart. Shredded, like they meant nothing. She'd found a way to get in, probably still had a key I forgot to change, and now she was making her point. The rage I'd felt before came surging back, but this time it wasn't just anger, it was something darker. I was tired of her games, tired of her thinking she could waltz in and out of my life as she pleased. I grabbed my phone, ready to call her, to confront her for the 100th time. But just as I was about to dial, I got a text. It wasn't from Beth, it was from an unknown number. And the message? It chilled me to the bone. You think you can just walk away from me? Watch what happens next. My hands clenched around the phone. It didn't take a genius to figure out who sent it. Beth was spiraling, and she was about to take things to a whole new level of crazy. I should have been afraid, maybe I was on some level, but mostly, I was furious. She was threatening me now. After everything she'd done. I called David, my lawyer, immediately. She's not done, I said, pacing the room as I explained what had happened. She broke into the house. She trashed my papers. And now she's sending threats. David didn't sound surprised, but he was dead serious. We need to take this to the next level. Restraining order. Now. A restraining order? I repeated, feeling like this was escalating faster than I could keep up. You think she's really dangerous? John, when people are desperate, they do stupid things, David said, his tone grave. You said it yourself, she's losing control, and she's not handling it well. If she's breaking into your house and sending threats, she's already crossed a line. You need to protect yourself. He was right, of course. Beth had already proven she wasn't playing by the rules. And the thought of her continuing to invade my life like this, coming into my home, tearing through my things, made my skin crawl. This wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about my safety, my sanity. File the papers for the restraining order, I said, feeling the weight of the situation settle on my shoulders. Do whatever it takes. The next few days were tense. I had the locks changed, installed new security cameras, and made sure David had all the documents ready to file for the restraining order. But Beth didn't back down. The texts kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. You can't get rid of me, John. You think a lawyer can stop me? Watch what happens next. She was unraveling, and I could feel her slipping further into desperation. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt a sickening twist in my gut, wondering what she would try next. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for her to show up, to escalate things even further. Then, one night, it happened. I came home late, again, exhausted from another long day of trying to pretend like my life wasn't falling apart. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw her. Beth. Sitting on the front steps of the house, her eyes wild, her hair a mess, like she hadn't slept in days. "What are you doing here?" I snapped as I got out of the car, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. "You're not supposed to be here." She stood up, swaying slightly, a manic smile plastered across her face. "Oh, I'm not allowed in my own house now? Is that it, John? You think you can just kick me out and move on? You think a piece of paper is going to stop me?" Her voice was sharp, venomous. She wasn't the same Beth anymore, not the one I'd married, not the one I'd loved. This was someone else, someone unhinged. "You need to leave," I said, stepping toward her, trying to stay calm. "If you don't leave, I'll call the police." "The police?" She laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh I'd heard from her before. It was cold, almost hysterical. "You think I care about the police, John? You think they can stop me?" She stepped closer, and for the first time, I felt a real wave of fear wash over me. This wasn't just a desperate woman, this was someone who had lost all sense of reality. Someone who was ready to do anything to get what she wanted. I took a step back, reaching for my phone, ready to make good on my threat. But before I could dial, she lunged at me, grabbing my arm with a grip that was stronger than I expected. Her eyes were wild, her voice a low hiss. "If I can't have you, John," she whispered, her breath hot against my face, "then no one will." That was the moment I realized just how far Beth was willing to go. She wasn't just playing games anymore, this was real. And I wasn't sure how I was going to stop her. But one thing was clear, I was in danger, and the storm was far from over. Beth's words echoed in my ears, her grip still tight on my arm as her wild eyes bore into mine. "If I can't have you, then no one will." For a moment, everything slowed down, the world around me felt surreal, as if I was watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. But this wasn't a nightmare. It was my life. I yanked my arm free, heart pounding, adrenaline kicking in. This wasn't the woman I had married, this was someone unrecognizable, someone dangerous. Every instinct screamed at me to get out, to put distance between us, but she was blocking the door, her body trembling with rage. "You're out of your mind, Beth," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You need help." Her face twisted into a sneer. "Help? You think I'm crazy? You think you can just file some papers and throw me away like trash?" She took another step toward me, her hands shaking, but I could see the desperation behind her fury. This was her last stand. Her final attempt to control something that had slipped through her fingers long ago. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, even as fear coiled tighter in my chest. "This isn't going to end well for you, Beth. You need to leave before things get worse." She laughed again, that same unsettling, hollow laugh, and then did something I didn't expect. She pulled out her phone and held it up, recording me. "Worse? You think it can get worse? Let's see how the world reacts when they see this. Poor John, the victim of a crazy wife. Who's going to believe you when I show them this?" She was unraveling fast, and I realized she wasn't just trying to hurt me physically, she was trying to ruin everything. My reputation, my life. She wanted to drag me down into the chaos with her. I reached for my own phone, dialing David, my lawyer, as I backed away slowly. The tension between us was a live wire, and I didn't know what Beth would do next. But I wasn't going to stick around to find out. "John," she screamed, her voice cracking with emotion. "Don't walk away from me. You can't just." The sirens. The sound of police cars pulling up to the driveway. I hadn't even realized my neighbors had called them, probably alerted by the shouting and Beth's erratic behavior. In that moment, everything froze. Beth turned toward the flashing lights, her face twisted in shock, as if she hadn't thought it would go this far. Two officers stepped out of the car, their expressions calm but firm as they approached. "Ma'am, step away from him," one of them said, his voice authoritative. Beth's gaze flicked between them and me, the reality finally sinking in. "No. No, this isn't how it's supposed to go," she mumbled, her voice breaking. "I was supposed to," she didn't finish the sentence. She just collapsed onto the ground, sobbing, the weight of her lies, her desperation, finally crashing down around her. The officers gently but firmly guided her to the patrol car. As they escorted her away, I stood there, watching in silence, a storm of emotions swirling inside me. Relief, sadness, and a strange, hollow emptiness. This wasn't how I imagined the end of our story, but in a way, it was the only way it could have ended. Beth's unraveling had led her here, to this final, desperate moment. And now, it was over. A week later, I sat in David's office, signing the final divorce papers. Beth had been served a restraining order, and she was facing charges for her erratic behavior that night. She wouldn't be able to come near me again. It was done, official, irreversible. The weight of everything pressed down on me, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. David handed me a pen, his voice calm. "You sure about this, John? Once you sign, there's no going back." I didn't hesitate. I signed the papers with a steady hand and pushed them across the desk. "I'm sure." He nodded, glancing down at the papers before looking back at me. "You've been through hell. But now you can move on. Move on." Those words felt strange, foreign, after everything. But he was right. I had to move forward. I had to leave the past behind, even if it still haunted me. As I left the office and stepped into the sunlight, I felt something shift inside me. The chapter with Beth was over. The chaos, the lies, the betrayal, they were all behind me now. And for the first time, I felt like I had control over my life again. It wasn't the ending I had imagined. But it was an ending nonetheless. And that was enough. In the end, I learned that some people will do anything to keep control, even when it means losing everything in the process. But I also learned that letting go is sometimes the only way to truly be free. And if you're ever in a situation like mine, don't wait. Don't let the lies fester, don't let the manipulation twist your reality. Walk away. Protect yourself. And never, ever let someone like Beth destroy you. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you're dealing with betrayal, lies, or manipulation, just know, you're not alone. And there's always a way out.